was great. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks to Bob and to Beth for incredible remarks. It's really an honor to be on this panel with all three of you, and I'm looking forward to Clyde's as well. And I want to give greetings from our chair, former Congressman and Democratic Whip David Bonnier, who helped us to found American Rights at Work a little over a year and a half ago. I also want to thank the Campaign for America's Future and the Institute for America's Future for inviting American Rights at Work to join this panel in particular, an economics that works for working people. Because of the work of folks on this panel, because of the great victories honored last night of ACORN and the Nevada AFL-CIO and others raising the minimum wage in Florida and Nevada, and I'm sure because of the work of many of you in this room, there is a growing awareness of the problem of low-wage work, of the rising inequality in our wealthy nation, of the impact of globalization on our jobs. But too often, even among liberals and progressives who care passionately about these issues, there's no real conversation about the U word, the role that unions and collective bargaining play in making our economy work for working people. And so I really applaud Take Back America for putting this exactly where I think it belongs, at the heart of any conversation about economic justice, and indeed any conversation about a sane and sensible economic policy for our country. So I'm going to talk briefly this morning about three key ways that collective bargaining is essential to making our economy work for all of us, not just high-paid CEOs. By number one, raising wages and benefits for the workers who are covered by collective bargaining agreements. Number two, raising standards for all of us, whether we have a union contract or not. And number three, building the power necessary to win on policy issues like living wages, health care, family leave, and Social Security. And after I remind us all how critical unions and worker organizing are to these issues that we all hold dear, I need to sound the alarm about the outrageous and daily assault on workers when they try to form unions and engage in bargaining, and how desperately we need public support, your support, and policy changes to restore these rights. So to begin, how worker organizing is critical to any vision of shared prosperity. Number one, unions raise wages and benefits for union members. Right? It's not a coincidence that as union density has declined, income inequality has risen in America. Workers with unions earn higher wages. In 2003, according to an EPI study, the average blue-collar union job paid $30.76 an hour in wages and benefits combined, compared to $18.11 an hour for non-union jobs. And as Beth has laid out in her presentation, it's not that some jobs are inherently good or inherently bad. We make jobs, good jobs, by organizing unions. So let's break it out a little bit more. Overall, unions raise wages of unionized workers by roughly 20%. Because unions level the playing field, they make an even bigger difference for low-wage workers, for women workers, and for workers of color. In so-called low-wage jobs, union members earn 27% more than workers with no union. So that's $760 a week versus $599 a week. Now, I don't know how many folks in this room make that kind of money. But let me pause and just say that for a working mom, a working family, that $161 a week, $644 more a month makes a really big difference. We call that the union advantage. Unions also narrow race and gender pay gaps. The union advantage for women workers is 33%. For African American workers, it's 35% more if you have a union. For Latino workers, the union advantage is 51% more if you have a union. So it's no wonder that women and people of color are the groups joining and forming new unions in the largest numbers. Even more than the difference in wages, unions make the difference on benefits, health care coverage, retirement security, paid leave, you name it. A new study just last month by the Employee Benefit Research Institute documents that 86% of union workers were covered by health care benefits through their job, compared with only 59.5% of non-union workers. In small firms, under 25 employees in a workplace, the difference is even greater. 80% of workers with unions have employment-based health care, compared with only 36% of workers who don't have a union contract. This is huge, right? If you care about health care, it is a no-brainer that you need to care about workers' ability to form unions. Number 2, workers organized into unions raise the standards for all of us. Workers organize unions to raise their own wages and benefits. And the impact of this, especially the larger the number of workers, whether in a given community or in a particular industry, and that's what we call density, raises the floor, raises the standards for all of us, whether we have union contracts or not. Strong unions set a pay standard that non-union employers follow, either because they have to compete for workers in the labor market or because they want to avoid unionization. The reverse is also true. The decline in union density lowers the wages for all workers because there's less pressure on non-union employers to raise wages. The more workers have unions, have higher wages, have health care coverage and retirement security, the more that becomes the norm for all of us. So we all have a stake in making it easier for workers to form unions. A clear-cut example of this is laid out in a report that we did at American Rights at Work last year on workers in the telecommunications industry. It's called No Bargain, and it's about union organizing at Comcast. We worked with a team of academics to do an industry analysis comparing jobs and job classifications and wages and benefits between telephone and cable. There's a great chart, and you can download this from our website at AmericanRightsAtWork.org. It compares the jobs in telephone and cable. They're essentially the same jobs. The skills and the training that you need for the technicians and the customer service reps to run a successful telephone operation are exactly what you need to run a successful cable operation. But get this. Full-time telephone workers earn on average $48,110 a year, and cable workers performing similar duties earn $34,756 a year. That's more than a $13,000 difference annually. And there's stark differences in benefits and job security as well. The difference is the union difference. The telephone industry is highly union. The cable industry has barely any union representation. Workers organized unions, and they made phone company jobs good jobs. These cable jobs are not going anywhere. The cable guy still has to come out to your house to hook you up, right? And the cable industry is awash in profit. These jobs can be good jobs if we help workers make it so. So workers' collective bargaining raises the bar for all of us. But finally, the other critical way that unions affect wage and benefit standards for all of us is number 3. Workers organized into unions create power to win on other economic policy issues. Of all people, David Broder of the Washington Post said it best this past Labor Day. He tells the story of talking to a younger reporter about the changes he'd seen on Capitol Hill over the last 50 years. Quote, he said, "It made me realize how rarely observers like me make the link between the decline of progressive politics and with it the near demise of liberal legislation and the steady weakening of organized labor." And he talks about the losses of wages and benefits that we've been talking about, but also goes on to say, when labor lobbied powerfully on Capitol Hill, it did not confine itself to bread and butter issues for its own members. It was at the forefront of battles for aid to education, civil rights, housing programs, and a host of other social causes important to the whole community. And because it was muscular, it was heard and needed. You know, we all know the bumper sticker, right? The labor movement, the folks that brought you the weekend. And it's a slogan. But it's a slogan that rings incredibly true. Minimum wages, living wage victories, family medical leave, overtime, Social Security, trade, health care coverage. Without more workers organized into strong unions, honestly, we don't have a chance in hell of winning on any of these key economic issues. If we want an economics that works for working people, we need to actively, urgently help more workers form unions. Not a nice, yes, yes to a coalition partner, yes, we'll take a position on right to organize. This is the cornerstone of building power to hold corporations accountable and insist that prosperity is broadly shared. At the end of the day, this is about power. Can you imagine a union-free America trying to organize on any of the issues raised this weekend in a union-free America? Let me tell you, Tom DeLay can. Grover Norquist can. George Bush can. Grover Norquist declared, we're going to crush labor as a political entity and ultimately break the unions. That's one of the main reasons why it's so difficult for workers to organize today. There are many reasons that it's gotten harder, but one of it is that the other side gets it. We'll be releasing a new report later this year connecting the dots between the anti-union movement as a central part of a right-wing agenda to shift public debate and shift power in this country. So quickly, because you'll hear more about this later today, as workers right now in America are attempting to exercise their democratic rights to form unions, because it is supposed to be everyone's legal right in this country to form a union, what's actually happening? Every year, 23,000 workers are illegally discriminated against or fired simply for engaging in union activity. That's somebody every 23 minutes. And every one of these people has a name, a face, a family devastated by this abuse. How about the case of Verna Bader, a 73-year-old grandmother who was fired in 1992 with 5 other women for trying to form a union at Taylor Machine Products just outside of Detroit. Her employer was found guilty by the National Labor Relations Board of breaking the law, and they ordered them to give her back pay, lost wages, to redress the wrongful termination. When we met Verna last year, she was still waiting, 12 years after she had been fired, for the company to give her her legally ordered back pay. We used Verna's story to launch our monthly series called Workers' Rights Watch, Eye on the NLRB. And again, you can see this on our website or sign up with some of our folks. We use the government's own decisions and data to demonstrate how the legal system is utterly failing to protect workers' rights. Because of the public attention in her case, Verna did finally receive her check, but Verna and her coworkers did not receive justice. The damage was done. The workers at Taylor Machine Products never went back to those jobs, and they were never able to form a union. A back pay award. That's the price an employer pays if he or she is found guilty of firing a worker for organizing. But get this, it's back pay minus whatever the worker earned in the meantime. Let's look at the case of Ernest Duvall. He's a CNA that we profiled in our report, Some of Them Are Brave, the Unfulfilled Promise of American Labor Law. Ernest was a model employee, a natural leader with an undisputed good record at King David Nursing Home in South Florida. Upon discovery that he was active in trying to form a union to advocate for better wages and benefits and respect, he was fired. 5.5 years later, the National Labor Relations Board found his employer guilty and ordered a back pay award and reinstatement. Of course, Ernest had gotten a job in the meantime, right? He had to. Any of us would have to. He had his wife. He and his wife, both working, have 2 sons to support. So 5.5 years later, Ernest gets a check for, get this, $1,797.58. Back pay minus what a worker earns in the meantime. That's all the law requires. A slap on the wrist to the boss for an outrageous disregard of Ernest's basic democratic rights, and I would argue his human rights. But King David got what they wanted. No union. Another worker described it. I was scared. My family was scared about me getting fired. She said it was hard to keep going when they lost so many of their coworkers through firings. And of course, that is the whole point. A pretty cost-effective way to bust a union. Fire a few people, remove strong leaders, terrorize everyone else, and maybe, years later, you'll have to pay a small fine. Firing workers is just the beginning of the story. There's a whole range of illegal and perfectly legal tactics employers use under our current broken system to keep workers from forming unions. But Verna and Ernest's stories are all too common. Every 23 minutes in the time we spend together at this panel, at least 3 more workers will be illegally fired or discriminated against just for trying to form a union. And we know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Right? You'll hear more about the right to organize this weekend, and you'll hear about the Employee Free Choice Act, which would begin to balance the scales and provide some protection for workers forming unions. People like ourselves, people who care about an economics that works for working people, need to be up in arms about workers' freedom to form unions. Workers like Verna and Ernest need us to stand with them to protest abuses of their rights. They need us to work with them to change labor laws and make forming a union a fair and free choice again for workers. And we all need Verna and Ernest. Without workers in motion, organizing unions, raising wages and benefits for all of us, building power to win for working families, we have no hope of turning this country around. So I know I'm in a room full of people this morning that have no intention of throwing up their hands in despair. And I know I am full of hope and full of determination. We have every reason to be hopeful. In spite of incredible odds, every day, every year, workers are taking the risk and forming unions. In spite of a dominant corporate culture that puts profits over people, we do see around us inspiring examples of unions and businesses working together. Just this last spring, we gave awards to Harley-Davidson and Catholic Healthcare West. You can run a successful business and still respect workers' rights. There is another way. We're going to tell that story and multiply these stories. And we all have good reason to be determined. I don't know about the rest of you. We've all got our own families and our own motivations. I was asked, and I'm wrapping up, I promise, I was asked in a workshop by a group of law students after I did this whole rap on these awful things happening to workers, and they said, wow, you know, this is so awful. This system is so broken. Like, how do you keep going when it just looks like winning is going to be too hard? And I laughed and I said, you know, I'm the mother of a 4-year-old son. So for starters, I do hard things every day, but I'm working for his future. Right? What kind of an economy, what kind of a democracy, what kind of jobs are we going to have in 15 years? Winning is the only option. So working together, we can, we will, and we must restore the freedom of workers to form unions. Thank you.